I think that it's important to know what it is that you're eating, and I think that it's a mistake to lump it all into one category. One could actually have a transgenic plant that didn't include the part that you eat. So maybe it's transgenic just in the leaves and you don't eat the corn leaf, or it's transgenic in the roots because you have root worms that, hurt the plant through the roots. I find it upsetting that it's all one big category and it's all bad in many people's eyes when, in effect, they don't know what they don't like.
If we are what we eat, what are we eating? It's not so easy to tell. When scientists throw words around like hybrid, transgenic, GMO, and genetic engineering, they're not always talking about the same thing. There are different techniques using different organisms and different parts of the DNA. We end up with different kinds of food. If we want labels, where should we start? Should labels show up on all food that's been grown with pesticides? On all food that's been hybridized or genetically modified? It's worth thinking about because we, all of us, are the consumers, and we can demand it. But we need to know what we're talking about. So please take a moment to digest. It's quite a mouthful. So your cornfields were burned at one time, right?
They weren't burned, they were vandalized, and somebody came through and chopped them down with a sickle or something.
Why did they do that?
Well, they might have thought they were transgenic, even though they weren't. And I think the person who did it is just upset about genetic research in general. And that's another lumping together of there's GMOs, there's genetics, and it all sounds very bad to people who don't know what it is.
You see, genetically engineered food can provide vitamins, such as vitamin A, and also help reduce disease.
But, Mr. Sanders, what about allergic responses to these new substances being placed in our food?
And I read that genetic engineering could permanently alter ecosystems and even endanger certain species.
Yes, children, but who underwrites the science film?
New Foods Incorporated, makers of genetically engineered food.
Yes, so they've really got us by the shorts on this one.
By the...
Mr. Sanders, do you want us to lie?
It's just a little deception, Mary, like how your mother pretends to be a natural blonde.
Gee, Mr. Sanders, I used to admire you. What happened?
You'll see, Tommy.
Did life get you by the shorts, Mr. Sanders?
Yes, it did, Tommy. It sure did.
So what's wrong with introducing a new line of food crops? Is it going to upset the environmental apple cart? Well, in nature, everything's connected, so farm ecosystems are complex. If we introduce a new species, one thing you can count on is that the other species are going to respond. Modifying organisms is a way of modifying the world.
There hasn't been a case that's been won against nature in terms of breeders breeding in some type of resistance that doesn't break down. There's tremendous pressure on the insects and the plants to adapt.
Biotechnology will need some time for people to get comfortable. There are valid concerns being raised, but there is some excellent science being done to show that these crops are safe and that they're providing some tremendous benefits to large farmers in North America and Europe and to some small farmers around the world.
Corporations say that genetically modified food is the greatest thing, if I may, since sliced bread.
Right. I'm not saying that there couldn't be benefits from genetic modification. What I'm saying is there's a tremendous rush, again, just based on all-out greed, to get these things to market, to recoup their scientific investments in them. The problem with biotechnology and genetic modification is they're forcing this technology on problems that don't need technological solutions. Starvation is a great one. We hear that genetically modified crops are going to cure starvation on the planet. The real answer to curing starvation is reducing poverty, increasing infrastructure, and straightening out politics. So starvation is a great example. They're the ones that brought it up, not me. But they should be ashamed for bringing it up.
Because we have enough food, right?
There's 1.5 times the amount of food on the planet today that we need. If you look at any advances in any science, the main ones came through the free thought, free exchange of ideas, things like that. The ownership issues bother me. How can you own a wheat plant? How can you patent a wheat plant? How can you take something that's existed for 10,000 years, that farmers have improved for 10,000 years, stick a single gene into it, and you own it.
So what I'd like to develop is a new farming system called genetically engineered, organically grown. So we take advantage of this new technology and this tremendous amount of information we have now from sequencing of multiple genomes. Take that information, develop genetic tools that we can use to generate a new variety that can be grown in an integrated sort of management system using organic techniques.
I know what you're saying. You're saying, look, we've been genetically modifying crops for years, and we're fine. What's the worst that can happen? All right, try this. Let's say we genetically modify this corn so that when insects eat it, they die. Okay, then the wind blows some of the pollen from that corn over here into these weeds. Well, they're really wildflowers, and they're butterflies that rely on these flowers, and they eat some of that pollen, and all the butterflies die. Okay, so there's a whole summer without very many butterflies. Now, these are the rare butterflies that fly at night. So the bats that would normally feed on those butterflies can't get enough to eat for a whole summer. So they don't have nearly as much success at making bat babies. So that next summer, there aren't nearly as many bats around to eat the mosquitoes. Now, these are the mosquitoes that carry a deadly disease, and they feed on your blood, and they give you that disease, and then we all die. See, that would be bad. Now, I admit I made this up, but are scenarios like this possible? Or is this just alarmist hype? Now, we've been farming for 15,000 years, carefully breeding species at the pace of the seasons. But now it's possible to introduce a new species into the Earth's ecosystem, never before seen, practically overnight. And what's the hurry? It's not a race. We're the human race. So let's farm responsibly. Let's require labels on our foods, and let's carefully test these foods case by case. That's the way I see it. And I'll see you next time on The Eyes of Nye.
We've covered a lot of ground, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Check out eyesofnye.org for more cool science. Major